Hello, my name is Shinay Trudeau. I'm here again with Bhavani Maki. This is the Yogi's Roadmap podcast. Welcome, friends and practitioners on the path. We are so glad you are choosing to spend your time with us today. Thank you. Bhavani, it really lights up my heart that we get the opportunity to sit together each week and take a deep dive into exploring the many facets of the wisdom teachings of yoga. Thank you for being here with me again today.
Thank you, Shanae. It's such a joy to have these conversations, and I miss having conversations with my teacher, my teachers, and so to be able to sit in conversations. I don't see myself as your teacher, but more as a colleague. It's so wonderful.
Likewise. Yay. Yay for conversation. So I added one more question that I didn't send you, but I think you'll be able to answer it. I'm not going to put you on the spot with anything hard, but it's something that I've been thinking a lot about for myself that I don't get to see you, my teacher, very often, maybe once or twice a year, if that. And I just stopped teaching for my students because I'm in my third trimester of being pregnant. So I have taken a pause on teaching, but I want to ask you about showing up for I'll just put it in the first person for my personal practice, even when, especially when I don't feel like it.
Yes. Well, I think it's fine. Don't practice and just see what happens. You'll come and rumming back. And I'll say I told you so. I mean, isn't that the truth?
It's so true. It's so true.
It's so truth. And you're just like, oh, things start like falling apart. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I feel. I just see where my ability to self-regulate, and definitely as I've gotten older, it's really like for my health. It's really for my health because things are starting to dry up and to freeze up. So yeah, it's like, go ahead, don't brush your teeth. You know what I
Right.
mean? And
Right.
see what that feels like. So we do have that option. Um, and certainly maybe not practicing could look like, oh, now I'm going to go do this. Oh, I'm going to go do that. Oh, I'm going to do the other thing. But there's something about, it's like paying those regular visits to yourself and sitting with yourself. And if you don't have those moments of, it's like I shared from those that really esoteric. They were transcriptions of Yogananda's teaching. There was like this window of time where I was being gifted like all these really, like they were unpublished works of masters. And so in it, Yogananda's like, look at me, I'm running this spiritual organization. I'm the guru. I'm like the HR person. I'm the CEO. I'm managing all of this, and I never break my appointment with God.
Mm.
So maybe it's like a reframing,
Mhm.
instead of it being like, oh, I betrayed myself or I let myself down. It's like, you're sitting with, how do we even put it into words? But like with source, with love, you're attuning to love, you're attuning to source. It's that moment where, sometimes it's completely humbling. Sometimes, like a practice is just like crying with your head between your knees. Sometimes it's glorious. Sometimes it's this. Sometimes it's that. I mean, hopefully, your practice isn't just some rigid thing that you go through, some rigmarole, um, but that it's really a place to get tender with yourself and to feel into what your needs are and also to like call on grace, So in that way, when we do that, I think we take the load off other people.
Mhm.
And not that we shouldn't lean into each other. And I think that's something, that was something that was so great that came up yesterday in the Kaivalyapada mentorship. And one of our sage wise ones, Sarah Schneiderman, who's amazing. She's my Didi, right?
Hmm.
She's my big sister. And just like even all this self-regulation, like it can make our life really narrow. And so, like being picky and being discerning and choosing who am I going to hang out with, and we can get very like become these little factions where it's like, oh, I'm only hanging out with vegans, or I'm only hanging out with people who do yoga, or only this kind of yoga, or I mean, it's just like Rumi says, narrowness is manyness. It's a fracturing kind of principle, and where we can loosen up and actually be maybe a little less discerning. But of course, here, this is coming from a woman in her 70s.
Yeah.
So there's a ripening process. So, it's like by having that practice, it's about it. What is tapas anyway, right? As we know, it's that burning desire, like, what am I yearning for? What is like pulling on me before I just go into the day and do all of, and am dutiful, because that's a big part of yoga too, to take time to tune into your own heart. And I know for me, it's like looking at the longer arc of my practice. A lot of yoga was kind of like pulling up my bootstraps, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to burn through this, and all of that. And, it did actually help me build a lot of self-esteem, you know, it really did. Because it was like, wow, I can do this. And wow, like I'm really like passionate about it. And I know I really need this. And wow, like I'm able to turn other people on too. And they're like excited by what I'm sharing. And wow, there's a whole bunch of us now. There's a community. This is amazing. So in that way, it was like a real building up process. And then it's been like, a dissolution process. And really, that's where it's so marvelous. But I know for me, like when as now that you're entering, this phase of motherhood, and you're really going to you're on this whole hormonal wave. I mean, it's just such a different wave. I think we get kind of settled into our lunar cycles as women, and then pregnancy hits, and you're on this whole other wave, and then coming out of pregnancy and nursing. And it's just like women are so watery, like a room of many houses, like the dream,
Yep.
right? And there's just, oh my gosh, the changes, the adaptability that's happening. That's where practice, it's like they say, it's like the one thing you can count on.
Yeah.
It's the one thing you can count on when others maybe, like you ask them for help, or you reveal your vulnerable side, and they're just doing the best they can, and they maybe don't say the exact right thing that you wanted to hear, and that sends you into another spiral. It's like practice will always just bring you back to the ground.
Yeah.
Back to the ground, and that ground, that humility and that hummus, and realizing that like we live in a fertile world. And what is it, that word that they use now, that it's brutiful, it's beautiful, and it's brutal, and the humanity and the beauty behind it and to be able to feel deeply, even beyond like, this like super, super persona that you've developed and the charisma that yoga gives you, because it makes you luminous, right?
Yeah.
You just become radiant. You can tell it has that way of doing it, whether it's endorphins or, you know, oxygenation, or the fact that like your little nerve fibers are titillated all the way to your toes, and all of these nadis, whatever it is, it makes you charismatic. But it also, like, then life is just gonna work you. Life will work you
Yes.
and bring you back down to earth. So yeah, I really noticed that for myself. It's like I I can't get away from it, because if I do, things start to spiral. And there's a history in my family of psychological, chemical imbalances, so I could feel it in myself, and I really noticed that, I would say, right in my early like 20s, like Surya Namaskara. It could get me out of these phases of depression, where I never sunk into deep depression. I think I had like seasonal depression and mild depression, but it was like being able to do that helped me to feel like, okay, I can do this being in a body thing. Because it hasn't been easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not always easy. So, yeah, go ahead, listeners, dump your practice and let us know how that goes.
Report back.
Yeah. And then listen, then we can loosen up around it. I think, people, they overdo, and
Yeah.
they create too much of an agenda for themselves. I remember when my teacher Rama would come, she'd teach a 3-hour workshop. We do like 3 poses,
Mm.
and you could see a lot of people were like, oh, and frustrated, and
Mm.
it was too subtle.
Yeah.
But it's, we learned in that sutra yesterday, number 413, te vyakta sukshma gunatmana. The cause is subtle,
Mm.
but the effect is felt. So many people are overdoing, and I know it's something that I still have in me, which is like, oh, I should be doing more, because there's that clinging to that past, like when I was a little like a hot shit yogini, I was like hot shit. I look
You were
back.
hot.
I didn't know it. I actually didn't know it.
Yeah.
I was always like, oh, I should be doing more. And, it was really competitive in the
Mm.
Ashtanga Vinyasa thing, like later. There was kind of that sense, but that kind of longing for that. And so there's part of me who's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do, 5 of these and 6 of those and 8 of those. And then like, I end up like with my head on a bolster, or like, just really, really going down to essential poses for me. And much of my practice is chanting and pranayama
Yeah.
and inversions. And it's what just helps me to, you know, do what needs to be done. And really, like, my juice is still going to my kid.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Even though he's not nursing anymore, that's where the juice is. And that's who I want to juice. And it's lovely. He had a little nightmare last night
Oh,
and crawled into bed with us, and I was just felt so lucky
yeah.
that he wanted to crawl into bed with us. How great is that?
That's precious. Yeah. A
And
safe
then
space.
yeah, and then he went to criticize me for how I responded in his dream. He was like, "It was a zombie apocalypse. Finally, we're in safety. And you said the dumbest thing, Mom. You said it's Thursday night. Let's watch Young Sheldon." I'm like, that actually would have been a good idea.
Sounds fine to me. I mean, don't make a big deal where it doesn't need to be a big deal.
Let's like just drop in, do the TV meditation. Yeah.
Totally.
So I think it's where, we try to accomplish too much, too quick,
Mhm.
and really having an appreciation. I'm sure you are. What's your practice like these days?
A lot of lying with props, bolsters and blankets and balls. And a lot of breathing, I gotta say, because, like you've always talked about how the back ribs start to get really narrow and contracted, and I feel it. So I'm really working on not, it's still happening, but like not overloading that area of my back. So
You
it's
want to
been,
get as much side body as you can,
yeah.
just to yeah, because the baby's getting bigger and bigger.
It's a fine line, what I'm hearing you say between the discipline aspect, holding ourselves accountable and easefulness, like true adaptability, like not getting too rigid. I love that quote from Rumi, narrowness is manyness, because it's like, yeah, it's totally fractured, and I think I have to do it a certain way, and I'm totally a recovering perfectionist. So I'm having to really let go of a lot of those ideas that I had about how it should look or how it's supposed to be. So thank you.
And I mean, it's so in the sutra, right? Third sutra, it's about coming back down to earth, you know? Oh, wow. Wow. So tada drashtuhu svarupe vashtana. Then, the seer awakens within, comes to land in their true form. You will be humbled in your humanity, right? Coming into that true form. And so much of it is really because I think, we come to yoga thinking like, I'm going to, I want that. I want that luminosity. I want, well, like how do things just seem to roll off that person's back? Or, if we get into the literature and, these ideas of being in this transcendental space, but really the transcendence is about being able to embrace your spiritual nature in the human form, and the humility within that,
Mm.
like you're about to go through one of the most supernatural experiences, giving birth. I just was like, oh my God, this, there's no like, there was no like giving birth. It was like there was no choice. It was
Yeah.
like a tsunami. It was like a hurricane. It was like the gravitational pull of the planets as your entire body is going into these contractions, and there's there's no like regulation. I mean, I guess there is, but it was so ingrained. Like, thank God you've been doing all this yoga. But it's just so much bigger than you. And then your body does this superhuman thing. And then your body just keeps doing all these weird things, like you become the ocean of milk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's stirring, it's like I just really felt like so embodied. I mean, don't you feel that way in pregnancy? Like,
Oh yeah. I mean, so far I'm loving it. And I really credit all of my yoga training and all of my dance training to these embodiment practices, because I'm not afraid. I'm loving it. Yes, I had a little nausea, but like, whoa, this is so cool. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know, and now you finally got the booty to really African dance right, and you got the, you know what I mean? You got like you can finally do some of those movements in the right way, you know?
Exactly, exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's where, I think also, the more that I've been exploring like structural integration and yoga as somatic experiencing. I don't care about the shape anymore. And this is where you can just see how so much of the way that yoga's taught, people are just getting narrower and narrower. And, I know that I harsh a lot on these heated classes, and like, God bless you all if you love it. But I've just seen like teachers who teach a lot of it or people who do excessive amounts of it, they become so like you can just almost see like there's a deterioration in their system, like that it's just so extreme. So even people's bodies become very, very narrow, and we don't allow ourselves to take up space. So it's like letting yourself make deeper footprints into the earth, deeper handprints, to let yourself feel big instead of, and even our ideas of like abhyasa, checking the downward pull. So much of yoga is pulling up, pulling up, pulling up. Just do that in your system for a moment. That's a state of hypertonic nervous system and anxiety. So it's like, let yourself be guru, let yourself be big, let yourself be heavy, let yourself take up space, let yourself be a part of space. And where so much of our motion is forward, it's like yesterday you even said when somebody would welcome you back and they would say welcome back, and you said, well, it's more like welcome forward,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But at
Yeah.
the same time, it's like you're coming back
Yeah.
and you realize, whoa, I have all this history and I have all this space around me. And it's like we're familiarizing ourselves with our beingness. And our beingness is very ancient. Like these bodies are very ancient. So when I was listening to like some of Mary Bond's talks, she was talking about how, that aspect in general, how people are so forward
Yeah.
in their motion. They're focusing on like what they have to do, and they forget the ancient nature of their being. And yeah, that but what happens is when we get into that narrowness, we kind of lose our diversified thinking, which is yesterday's sutra again. Creation requires diversification.
Yeah.
Unification is just a concept. It's a reality, but it's a concept. And unification is the sum of all those parts that are always like going through cycles and returning back to the center of now. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
I loved yesterday's sutra and just about the subtlety of it and how like never underestimate the power of doing the most subtle. And so there's so much we can say, and if you want to say more, please. But I also am curious about all of the other aspects of yoga you mentioned in your own personal practice. You do pranayama and chanting. So as much as we need these somatic embodiment practices, and which yoga is very much, there's also all of these other pieces, especially tending to the mind. And this is not about overthinking for all of our overthinkers out there. This is about, real, I don't even know the right words, but it's attending to those mind waves and those thought waves. And perhaps you can say more about the whole embodiment process.
Oh yeah.
You know, nothing
Yeah,
big.
I mean, I it's like I think it's really helpful. One way to like, it's all prana, right? It's all prana shakti, which is sentience, and it's about being sentient beings and seeing, like, yeah, it is helpful to be able to compartmentalize. And we know in trauma release that there is a timing to that. And if you were trying to unwind of all the trauma too quickly, it just throws you deeper into trauma. So, the way that I think that modern psychology is framing it, and it's, of course, in the folklore of yoga, is bottom to top and top to bottom methodologies. And so bottom to top is the somatics. Like, we could talk about anxiety, we could talk about things that are unresolved, or, like, anxiety is anything like unknown about the future when we get worrisome about it. And on the bottom to top therapy, I could say, like, scrunch your forehead, you know so what's that feel like? Like, what does that feel like in your body?
Stressful.
Yeah, stressful. And then, so that's an emotion. And then the emotion has a deep storyline within it. And sometimes the story just like reaffirms or reasserts itself. And, that's a whole unwinding process. And it's interesting, like, even in my long like periods of going through psychotherapy, which are so invaluable, so much of it, you talk things through. That's the top to bottom, right?
Mhm.
And you talk things through, and you kind of get to where your wounds are, where your vulnerabilities are, that you have different choices, being able to see what's neurotic, what isn't neurotic, what's, yoga's chitta vritti nirodha, what's useful, what's not useful, kind of a thing. And then it all comes down to somatics. It all is like going back into the most basic, fundamental yogic experiences of, like, where's the bottom of my breath, etc., right? So that's a huge project and a very necessary project. But, like, as big as that is, we can just say, okay, like, that's very big and the future's always going to be unknown, but I can also just relax my forehead and feel like how I'm able to settle into space, and I'm able to receive the support of the earth. And that and being able to receive support is really kind of a lost art these days in this do-it-yourself generation. You want to do something, you just go on YouTube. You could, like, build a rocket ship on YouTube. You could do anything on YouTube. But what we're learning to do is also, like, see what we need and be able to ask for that support. And so the psychotherapy aspect is where, because I think it is a real thing, it's a real concern, especially if you're a teacher. Like, you don't want to burden people,
Yeah.
you know, and you don't want to disappoint people, and all of those things. So being able to hire somebody who's, this is what they do, they've seen it. They've seen, like, a million neurotic people. Like, you're not like, there's nothing unique or special, or, you're just the honest one who's coming in, or maybe not even neurotic. You're just like, I'm just really feeling, like, kind of hollow here, or I'm feeling frustrated here, and I need some insights. And, good psychotherapist is going to ask good questions. So having, I really believe that, for 99% of us, an authentic yoga practice is going to bring us to that precipice of, like, okay, like, I know that these stories are embroiled in my system, and according to the Yoga Sutra, right, these are embroiled into the unfolding of creation.
Mhm.
Like, it's so much bigger than you, or mommy issues or daddy issues or sibling issues. It's like it's encoded. This is like what keeps the creation unfolding and folding in on itself. That, you're going to go to that place and you're going to have those questions, and you're going to leave, you're going to have to go and ask somebody and talk to somebody who can really help you navigate that stuff. It's just part of being a whole being. And you and I know, right, that Patanjali, who is like, he's the aboriginal teacher of yoga.
Yeah.
Okay. He was multidisciplinary. So there was psychology, there was somatics, there was also grammar. And these are the three karanas where we have to learn. We may get really good at regulating our own bodies. We may get really good even in the way that we think about things, but we may be poor communicators.
Mm-hmm.
So we also have to learn like our languaging, and even the languaging within ourselves. And what what is so beautiful is going back to that sense of tapas with the svadhyaya, with the Ishvara Pranidhana, is that as much as we can have good intention and good action, it's the emotive. Ooh, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Not just the emotion, but the emotive that really, it's the bhava, it's the mood that we carry. And sometimes our mood is low, but how can we hold that with tenderness and know like, okay, I'm being worked right now. Okay, I'm just being born again. Like, I'm just so amazed at how many phases we go through. So many phases. And I wonder if, like, it's kind of coming into these years now, whether or not you're going to have children, but you come to a certain level of like cellular maturity that you start to appreciate the phases that you've been through and start to look at the phases ahead of you. And it's so tender. It's just so tender, all of it. Yeah.
Yes. It's so tender. I feel so tender.
Love me
Yeah.
tender.
Yeah. Wow. And I mean, as Gary, the gentleman I was working with for IFS internal family systems, he would always say to me at the end of our sessions, he would say, be tender with yourself. Be tender with yourself. And I was like, oh my God, I can do that. I'm like, "Hey, okay, I can do that. I can do that."
Because I think,
Just
those of us who come to yoga, we're kind of like, we hold a high expectation for ourselves, which is a beautiful thing, but sometimes it's a double-edged sword.
yeah. Yeah. And the necessity for all of these, practices, these learnings, endeavors through like the somatics in and through the body and working with our psyche, our emotives, our emotions and all of that. That's yeah. I wonder if you might add a few words about um, the pain, the physical, emotional, and how there is some discomfort involved on the path. And as you put it, it's a process of uncrumpling consciousness. And I love
Well,
that.
I didn't invent that.
Okay,
I have
who
to say
said
that's
this?
like, oh, it's just part of the folklore. It's a very
Ah,
classical,
love it.
like yogic metaphor. Um, well, you know, one of the questions in our Divya Drishti session yesterday, which no one really touched in our room, was, can you experience pain without suffering?
Mm.
And I think we can, you know, um, because, there's of course pain that is, Patanjali, he's like pain with a purpose, right? It's like that heyam dukkam anagatam, and it's the pain that has no purpose, that doesn't make any sense. So I remember looking up pain in the dictionary. I feel like I want to look it up again, but it said that which humans strive to avoid.
Mm.
And so, pain is a huge umbrella term.
Yeah.
But, pain is that which humans try to avoid. Maybe we need to flip it on its head and say,
Mm.
that which we try to avoid is what pain is. Hello.
Yes. Boom.
Oh my God, I never really looked at it that way. I mean, maybe I did, but it feels really poignant in that way. So, the path of psycho-spiritual maturity is radically non-avoidant, right? And it's when and this doesn't mean that we have to like dig into it or stir it up. But like, it's like Venkateshananda says, he says, you don't need to go looking for pain. It'll find you. So when it comes up, that's an opportunity, right? And what we've been learning in this Kaivalya Pada is that like these patterns, they're so sukshma, they're so subtle that they could completely be dormant. Like I know for me, I was completely numb in my low back
Mm.
for most of my life. Like I had no lumbar curve, there was no movement whatsoever. And I managed to do some pretty fancy things and crank on different parts of my body. And that put me in extreme pain. And then I had to, like, through many other mediums, like start to uncover, like, are my lumbars actually fused together? I mean, I had chiropractors who told me, like, oh, I think you're, one of those people who were born with a fused lumbar spine. And then through like structural integration and all this stuff, realizing that no, this was like a trauma response.
Mm.
This was a response of having been like molested as a kid and raped as a teenager, and like all of these things which are more common than we think. And even if it hasn't happened to you, for sure it's happened to somebody close to you. So our mirror neurons pick that up. So I had like no pain in my low back during my pregnancy, which was unheard of because it was just like
Mm.
rigid. And now, as I'm like starting to, years and years and years and psychotherapy and unwinding these things in my body and starting to get like this nascent appearance of a lumbar curve, I feel it. And sometimes it feels terrible
Mm.
because what was numb was in this latent, dormant state. And yet it's like, oh my God, this like sometimes, I'm not used to feeling this sensation. This is uncharted territory. It's just so much better if I lock down
Mm.
and like stuff the pain so I don't have to feel it. But now there's almost like, wow, I'm starting to feel some movement there. And now I'm actually learning how to walk a little bit, or somehow I don't even know how I was moving. I don't know I got anywhere, but because you need lumbar movement to have. It was all going to my sacrum before.
Mm. Mm.
So, you know, it's like pain is a big umbrella term, and it's really about looking at Is it something I'm avoiding?
Mm.
Is it something that I'm just digging into deeper? What's the gift on the other side?
Mm.
Because there is a gift on the other side. It's like they say, you know, pain is temporary, but the pearls that you gain from it will last you a lifetime. They can even last for generations.
Mm.
So, much of our learning happens through pain. That's like the way that, our intrinsic self, our innate, speaks to us and it's like, you can't do that anymore. Like something deeper, even though we may have a stiff upper lip and be, tapasvini, intense practitioners. There's something within you which is like, no,
Mm.
this is going against the grain. And then like hopefully with time, we don't have to learn through pain anymore. And wasn't that fantastic in yesterday's sutra where it said, really, there's not so much to learn? Like, really?
Yeah.
After all that?
No wonder why it's in the fourth chapter.
I mean, come on. The 13th sutra, right? Like, lucky 13.
Yeah.
There's really not much to learn. It's more, and you've said it so many times, it's kind of like the unlearning,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
A lot of that pain is where we try to use old tricks.
Yeah.
So Sutra 12, 412 was like, are you moving from memory or imagination?
Mm.
Whew. And what was it? A few sutras before that, I think it's Sutra 6 is where it says really the only original mind or creativity is accessed through that place of one's own meditation,
Mm.
where it's like you can find like the story, what's happening in the meditation. There's all the vritti, the story, and you can finally like drop underneath the storyline a little
Mm.
bit. Then you're actually seeing things and feeling things with fresh eyes.
Mm.
Yeah. So yeah, there is discomfort because it's that growing edge. And as soon, back to yesterday's sutra, as soon as you think you got it figured out, things just crumble. Things will, it's like that Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto energy. You think you got
Yeah.
it solid, Saturn, then structures start like crumbling.
Yeah.
And then Uranus comes in, it's like the earthquake, and then Neptune comes in and just like dissolves it away. And then Pluto, it's like the earth opens into a chasm underneath you. And look at how many times that's actually happened on the planet.
Yeah.
You
It's
want to feel
true.
better about your life? Watch Nova. I'm serious because you're just like, oh my God, there was an ice age, and then there was like this huge super volcano, and then there was a flood, and then there was another ice age, and then there was a meteor, and like there's been so many cycles, and somehow life forms just like, and it could just be like a little like single cell amoeba, and then it becomes this complex thing, and it reaches such a high level of complexity that it almost just has to like it undermines itself.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that reframing of pain. That which we try to avoid is pain because it requires that we actually have to, when the earth opens up in front of us, go there. Like we can't just say, oh, that's not happening. Like it requires that we take a look at it, which my sense is that that's often the discomfort part, that it might not be, physically painful or, painful to remember those kinds of things, but it's like, whoa, I actually have to see this for what it is.
And that you're not alone, like you're not the first one to feel this way. Hatha yoga, you're not going to be the first and you're not going to be the last. Um, and so the good news is that it's not all on you, but it's your experience. So, like, what is the bhava that you can hold yourself with in those moments? And, it's all a wave, right? It's all a wave. Some of those waves are really long. Um, yeah.
Mm. Thank you so much. This is really, really inspiring. Is there anything else you want to add to this conversation
Um,
about the somatics or the psychology, which they're one and the same, but
yeah, they are one and the same. I mean, like psychotherapy, they say the etymology is care of the soul, right?
Mm,
And then I'm curious about this. I don't know, because this is where, we look at, my father being a linguist, right? And we look at our English speaking dictionary. It relies mostly on like the European, Indo-European or whatever, Proto-European. I forgot. I'm
mm,
sorry, Dad. I don't know these terms. But and then you have the Samskrita. But basically, like there was these Aboriginal speech or words, and like soma. So in Greek, soma, modern Greek, it means your body. But what is soma in the yogic tradition?
nectar.
It's a nectar, and it was like a plant medicine.
Mm,
So it
mm,
was it was some kind of like a shamanic plant medicine that was
mm,
taken, which is where we start to go into that realm between the mind and the body, which is the spirit, right? And
mm,
somehow there's a dance between those. So, we're the only ones who even look at our body, and it goes back to like the earliest dissections of cadavers, where they were just basically kind of like throwing away all of the fascia just to kind of look at the organs. And so, what is my body? Oh, it's a liver, it's lungs, it's kidneys, it's all these pieces. It's like piecemeal. And the fascia, which is like the chitta, which is like the prana, I mean, it's where the magic happens in our body. And there's something like, I don't know, it's 4 times more nerves within our fascia than within our muscles.
mm,
It's like
mm, mm.
where the transmission and the communication happens. You know, it's it'll be interesting because I think it was only like, in the 80s at Harvard where they actually had the first symposium where they talked about fascia as being like, wow, this is something that we just kept throwing away
Mm,
when we were looking at bodies. But it is what we know as the soma. It's where the magic happens. It's where
mm.
the communication happens with our mind and our psyche and our spirit and our soul. So, I'm curious with this whole AI thing. I don't want to be, as much as I tend towards a dystopic kind of point of view around that, maybe wouldn't it be wonderful if it allowed us to be more human again?
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe we could stop being so compartmentalized and so reductionist and so
Mm.
narrow in our specialization that, like, who knows? I'm just coming up with this idea right now. Maybe if AI ran all the nitty gritty, we could go back to basket weaving and love making and
Mm,
you know
totally. That's got my vote. But I really appreciate the reframe because I do. I mean, as soon as you said it, I was like, oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like if that's where evolution's headed, sign me up. Back to the humanity. Yeah.
We'll just have to wait and see, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Shanae, for squeezing in these podcasts before the big bang, the big birth, and yeah, trying to rack them up here.
Yep. Yeah, I think we're doing pretty good.
We're doing good.
Okay. I think that's it. I think that's
Okay, I just
it.
paused.